Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues. First of all, I'd like to ask you to put your headphones on, otherwise it's going to be very hard to hear what we're saying. Please take your seats and get your headsets. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today to one more side event on sustainable transport at the SDG Pavilion. And today we're going to focus on effective transport strategies for boosting the nationally determined contributions. My name is Dmitry Maryasin. I'm the Deputy Executive Secretary of UN Economic Commission for Europe, and I have the pleasure to moderate today's event, where we will hear from a number of countries on their perspective and experiences. And before I do so, let me share just very briefly why we're here. First, in our view, existing or potential decarbonization targets for transport are not yet reflected in nationally determined contributions adequately. So transport is not the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear NDCs. Secondly, many countries have not yet been able to develop their low or zero carbon transport targets or policies. So there is also a gap at national policy level. And thirdly, the current transport measures in NDCs, and for some countries they are there, are not sufficient if we are to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. We all know that transport is a fundamental part of our life, but it's also a big emitter. By some estimates, up to a quarter of global carbon emissions come from transport. This is where the action by both the multilateral system and the member states need to be concerted. We as UNECE are responsible for regulating inland transport. We host all of UN's conventions on road and rail, and recently we adopted a decarbonization strategy for inland transport in a breakthrough for that sector and complementing the existing ICAO and IMO strategies. So for the first time we have a three-pronged approach to decarbonizing transport, and we believe this is a good foundation for now bringing action on decarbonizing transport to scale via including it in NDCs, making sure that every country knows what it wants to do, has policies in place, and is well equipped both from the financial and capacity point of view to do so. We operate with the concept of national decarbonization action plans for transport sector, and this is a concept that we would like to promote in partnership with the UNFCCC and all of you to make sure that these national transport decarbonization action plans actually become an inherent part of the next generation of NDCs. And we look forward to hearing from specific country examples of what it might look like in practice. So, finishing my opening remarks now, I'd like to invite to take the seats here our panelists, His Excellency Honorable Ro Filipe Koranikio Tuisao, Ministry of Public Works, Communication, Transport and Meteorological Services from Fiji. Her Excellency Miss Agne Vaiciukevičiūtė, Deputy Minister of Transport and Communications, Lithuania, and His Excellency Mr. Patrick Andre, the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Transport from Seychelles. Honorable Minister, I will start with you, and I would like to ask you to most kindly share with us the perspective from Fiji on how is Fiji planning to integrate more ambitious transport targets and actions into the next round of the NDCs, and also if you can share more broadly the perspective from your side when it comes to the very complex nexus of transport and and climate change when it comes to the experience of Fiji? Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much. I didn't know that we were going right to the panel discussion. But anyway, Honorable Baku Kevikute, I think that's the right pronunciation, Deputy Minister for Transport and Communications, Lithuania, and also Honorable Patrick Andre, Principal Secretary, Seychelles, and Deputy Executive Secretary, UN Economic Commission for Europe. It is an honor to be here as a Pacific Island country to share our experiences regarding the important topic about transport. We are not really a big country, a small Pacific Island country comprising 330 islands. And we have about 140 registered vehicles comprising various types of vehicles, and one vehicle for every 6.4 persons. In terms of maritime, there are about 6,000 vessels, but most of these, 90%, are small vessels, and 6% are more than 15 meters. So in terms of decarbonization, it is a huge challenge for us. As already mentioned, decarbonization needs the proper regulatory and legislative framework. So we as a country, we have not gone past that stage. And that is something which we continue to develop. And of course, moving towards what we have already pushed for, which is the 1.5 degree target. In terms of regulatory and legislative, we are currently working on the Fiji's National Transport Sector Plan and National Transport Decarbonization Implementation Strategy, which will gear us towards decarbonizing transport. But as I already mentioned, it's the environment is quite difficult with 300 islands scattered, and in terms of monitoring compliance, again, that's even without moving towards decarbonization, we still have challenges regarding monitoring of safety, especially when we talk about maritime. You need to have safety, compliance, and regulations in accordance with the standards of IMO. So that is the first step. Before we even go past that, then we are already thinking of decarbonization, which again is a huge cost. So that is why it's important that our negotiations at IMO is lifted to this level of conference of parties in terms of what we need to decarbonize, costs money, that needs finance and support from our various development partners for us to reach that stage, which is why the concept of levy is something which we as a country fully support together with our island countries. So I'll just start off with those comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for outlining the situation in Fiji, but also mentioning a number of important points on challenges in monitoring, and the need for an international framework that would support the capacities of countries around the world, including small island development states. I'd like to now turn to you, Madam Deputy Minister, asking you to share Lithuania's perspective and experience on integrating transport targets and actions into the next round of NDCs, and and any other insights you would like to share from your side.
Thank you very much. Once again, it's a huge pleasure and honor to be surrounded by the ministers. I'm very happy to be here since I'm going to COPs from the very beginning of my term. I feel the transport sector has to be involved fully within this conversation, and it's a crucial part of it, especially because when we speak about Lithuanian situation, this is a Baltic country, the European Union country with the population around 3 million. So we already have a lot of push from the European Union on green digital targets as well. And we feel that we are in the verge of the change. I understand that we have to do more, But when we started everything in 2021, there was a good idea, but there were no strategies, no national, municipal, urban mobility plans, no finances. And at the moment, after 4 years, I can say that we are already implementing and deploying everything from regulation. All the regulations are in place for requirements for electric infrastructure, for buses, public transport, and not even that, we also have targets for our municipalities that they need to reach. So we do have approved by the ministry plans on infrastructure, how much, when it should be, and we are in the stage that all the financing is already there. So it takes time to catch up. So what we are doing right now, we are monitoring if the targets are going well or not. Obviously, without all the good parts, we have the same challenges as all other countries, since we do have a very old fleet in Lithuania, and it's a huge part of the culture. So, but we do a lot with creating cycling paths within the cities. We created low emission zones from next year, at the beginning of next year. The 10 biggest cities will have to create low emission zones. I think this is a must for reaching our targets, but at the same time, politically, it's really not easy to convince the broader society to accept it. It's a work for us. But so when we speak about the traditional goals like public transport as well in Lithuania from 2029, we will not allow not electric or alternative fuel ran buses on our streets. And we changed even laws for green procurement procedures, which year by year decrease in the proportion you can buy with the combustion engine at the moment. So the regulation part is already there. But what I would like to highlight, it's not only about doing what is necessary, since I know that all the countries are catching up on the right direction, so that the discussion is not now anymore about do we need it, but how we will do it. I love it. I love this kind of discussion. But what Lithuania is doing even more, so we're pushing our seaport and all our national companies, airports, seaports, to innovate. And Lithuania just started a project, our seaport started a project with building a hybrid electric hydrogen ship, as well as hydrogen stations. So we're forcing them to innovate in this area as well. And these projects are one of the unique ones on European level as well. And as you should all know, that when we are talking about innovations, it means you're first. It means a lot of time it will cost you more. So as a country, we're trying to balance it through different aspects by trying to innovate, as well as we're trying to keep up with the change which we are doing. And the last idea from my side for the very beginning is that when we came, there was nothing in place. Now we have everything in place, and we see that it works. So it feels that on the national and municipal level, if you do and dedicate a lot of time and efforts and create the policies in place, it works. And it was just recently I came from another conference, and where were a lot of Lithuanian businesses. And it was first time in my term for 4 years when they said, the government is doing something right. So I was very, very happy that we visibly seeing that change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing the update on the path on which you have embarked. But I think you're still on it. You also highlighted the issue of cost, but also the issue of public perception when it comes to launching an ambitious reform, a difficult one. And then thank you for mentioning the importance of regulation, and then the very difficult issue of old fleet, We were just talking about this earlier today, that if a solution is just to electrify and ship all the old vehicles to developing countries, this is not a solution. This is not really helping us decarbonize the transport system at scale globally. So we'll need to look for ways to manage the old fleet and to phase out in a way that is sustainable both inside the country but also on in a sense of transboundary dimensions of it. Let me now pass to our final panelist, the Principal Secretary from the Ministry of Transport from the Seychelles. Ms. Andre, over to you to share your country's experience and plans to integrate more ambitious transport targets into the next round of NDCs. Over to you.
Hello. Thank you. Mr. Chair. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. It is a pleasure to be here to provide Seychelles' perspective in this area. As you know, Seychelles is a group of islands comprising 115 islands and scattered in the Indian Ocean. So we are part of SEEDS and we are very vulnerable with regards to climate change. Seychelles recognizes the transport sector's pivotal role in achieving a climate objective, particularly as it enhances its commitments in the next round of Nationally Determined Contributions. Seychelles is set to integrate more ambitious transport targets into NDC 3, aiming for a 26.4% reduction in economy-wide GHG emissions, below the business-as-usual scenario by 2030, aligned with the big long-term goal of net zero emission by 2050. Key to the effort is a complete shift towards zero-emission mobility and reducing the nation's dependency on fossil fuel for land transportation. The ongoing e-mobility transition focuses on placing out internal combustion engine vehicle and promoting electric vehicles. The transition is supported by public-private partnership, which we are strongly relying on for expanding EV charging infrastructure, introducing more favorable import tax exemption for electric vehicles and infrastructures, reduction in license fees, and providing attractive incentive to drive adoption by 2030. Also, it must be noted that we have banned the importation of second-hand vehicles, as has just been mentioned. We only allow that for heavy vehicles because the electric vehicles technology has not really been developed along these areas. So Seychelles targets significant milestone of 30% of the land transport fleet to the electric vehicles, 30% of large tourism businesses, and 20% of small and medium tourism operations to have electric vehicles in their fleet, and 30% of medium and heavy duty vehicles to be electric by 2030. Additionally, Seychelles is upgrading its public transport system. Plans include replacing traditional buses with electric models. In 2025, the Seychelles Public Transport Corporation will deploy its first 2 demonstration electric buses in its fleet, which will build the confidence, paving the way for a fully electrified public transport system by 2050. Seychelles is also addressing the life cycle impact of EV batteries by enabling extended producer responsibility and end-of-life management guidelines. This circular economy approach includes recycling and repurposing batteries, mitigating environmental risk while creating economic opportunities. Moreover, Seychelles is working to integrate renewable energy into its EV charging network. The development of solar-powered charging stations and grid modernization are central to ensuring that the e-mobility transition is fully sustainable. Collaborative efforts with international partners are underway to enhance technical capacity and secure necessary financing. Finally, institutionalizing e-mobility will ensure long-term, inclusive governance, which will guide policy development, oversee demonstration projects, support capacity building initiatives, and monitoring progress to achieve targets set in the NDC. The NDC will set specific GHG reduction targets and guide the country's path towards sustainable urban mobility. By embedding these strategies into our NDC 3, Seychelles is demonstrating commitment to ambitious climate actions, aiming not only to reduce emission, but also to enhance energy security, improve air quality, and foster sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'm being told that we do not have time for the second round of questions. I apologize for that, but let me thank our distinguished panelists, dear ministers, for being here, for sharing the ambitious targets that they have set for their countries, and being very open about the challenges, be it public perception management, be it working at the local level, be it scaling up financing, including by tapping international sources, or these hardly, new but very deep issues of, storing the EV batteries or preventing the importation of used vehicles. These are not popular or trendy topics. People try to avoid them because they prefer to talk about the new things. But unless you know what you do with the old, you're not sustainable in a true sense. That's why circular solutions will be so important, and we need to talk about circularity when we talk about decarbonizing transport. From our side, we take note that we have at least 3 champions here in the room on putting transport high on the agenda in NDCs, on setting concrete targets and then underpinning these targets with policies and regulatory change. As UNEC, together with other regional commissions, we will be working closely with UN DESA on the implementation plan for the Sustainable Transport Decade, and we hope these experiences will be informing it. As UNEC, we're also embarking on the process of implementing the decarbonization strategy for inland transport that I referred to earlier today. We'll do it hand in hand with IMO and ICAO, because we believe you cannot decarbonize just one mode of transport. You need to work across modes. And I invite you, please join us tomorrow for the first time ever at COP. The 3 organizations, Inland Transport Committee of UNEC, ICAO and IMO, will discuss decarbonizing the transport with all 3 modes present in the room. It's an event inside event room 6 at 3 o'clock tomorrow. And let me finish by saying that we rely on your guidance, your experiences, and your support in partnering with UNFCCC to make sure that NDC 3.0 and follow-up to NDC 3.0 are much more serious about transport than the previous round of NDCs were. I think today is a testament to the potential, but also to the challenges we face on this path. And with this, I'd like to ask you to please give a round of applause to our distinguished panelists. And I pass on to my fellow moderator for the next session, who will introduce the next round of speakers. Please stay with us.
So we'll just have a quick group photo, and while we prepare for our next panel discussion. So thank you all once again for our distinguished high-level panelists, our ministers, and next we will have a more technical discussion on concrete next steps forward, following some of the high-level remarks that we have heard from our first group of panelists. So I would like to invite our panelists in this next segment to their seats. So with us, we have Mr. George Tavo, the Deputy Secretary of Operations, Ministry of Public Works, Meteorological Services and Transport of Fiji. Please. And we also have with us Mr. Jason Hill, who is the Divisional Chief of Africa, Europe, and Middle East Affairs from the Department of Transportation of the United States. And joining us from the NGO world, we have Ms. Alice Yu, Director of Policy Outreach and Strategic Communications from the SLOCAT Partnership. And we also have with us Ms. Olivia Wessendorf, who is the Advisor on Sustainable Transport and Global Outreach at the Secretary General's Office at the International Transport Forum at the OECD. So thank you all for joining us. So we have heard from our very inspiring speakers in the previous segment on some of the high-level policies and initiatives that will be implemented or have already been implemented in various countries. And next, I would like to turn to our panelists for more specific action, perhaps, moving forward, and to share with us how they are planning to integrate more ambitious transport actions in the next cycle of the NDCs. So perhaps we could start with Mr. George Tavo from Fiji.
Thank you. Very good morning to you all. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here this morning to share Fiji's experiences in terms of what is the progress that it has done so far in terms of trying to address the decarbonizations into our transport sector. One of the major work that we are actually doing at the moment is looking at the policy part of it. We feel that the transport sector master plan is one of the areas in which we need to address, and also the decarbonization, transport decarbonization implementation strategy, which is one of the, I believe, those are the requirements, some of the requirements in order for us to get in the finances in terms of our efforts to decarbonize the transport sector. So we will start off with that, and I think we are actually in the progress at the moment with some the terms of reference, drafting up of the terms of reference with the assistance of the New Zealand government. That work is expected to start at around January next year. So we're looking at completing that work by August next year. So this is an area as well that we would like to bring up into COP 30 in Brazil. Most probably we'll get it so that we can even launch it. And so that's the two major documentations that we are actually working on in terms of our policies. In terms of the transport sector, in terms of the implementations on the ground, I think we still have work to do in that space. The decarbonization of our vessel, the old vessel fleets that we have, it's quite challenging as well. We would like to tighten up our policies in that regard in terms of the age of vessels. But again, we don't have the finances to back that up, so that at the end of the day, it's the people who will bear all these costs. So we'll need to look at, it's sort of like a catch-22 situation for Fiji at the moment. On one hand, we would like to move away from fossil fuel vessels. But on the other side, it's quite an expensive exercise. It's not an easy exercise for a small country like Fiji. So we're looking into partnerships in these areas in where we can get our global partners to come into that space and assist us. That also applies to our land transport as well. So we're looking into some of the developments in those areas in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. George Tavo. And I think you've also raised a very important point about finance, which we've already heard from various events, actually. And I think this is also one of the core focus areas here at COP29. So perhaps we can come back to that question later. And so next, I'd like to invite Mr. Jason Hale to share some of his perspectives from the United States.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity, especially when we talk about the wealth of resources that our peers from other governments, from NGOs, and from other sectors are bringing to the table. So that if you are starting out from an economy where you don't have a lot in your NDCs yet, there's so many resources out there that, I would encourage you to look at. For example, tomorrow at the U.S. Center at 4:45 p.m., we'll be launching our Climate Strategies That Work Playbooks, which is an example of where we're trying to build off of the NDCs that we've set and giving our urban colleagues at the municipal level, at that subnational level, a place to get started. And so I think from my perspective, the biggest sort of gap that I see in the opportunity is not just setting the NDC, and especially when we're talking about a nationally determined contribution, it's how do we bring that one level down to our partners at the subnational level where there's a lot of these quick wins where we can start pushing for greater change. We have to be able to connect them not just with sort of the goal we set, but a strategy, a treasure map of how do we get there. And so there's a lot of that sort of learning that we have through partners like SLOCAT, through different efforts by economies. We're looking a lot at not just how do we make our transportation system more clean through the electrification agenda, but how do we also think about these things like land use reform and convenience, as well as efficiency gains through mode shift. There are a lot of these very low-hanging fruit opportunities, but I think the last thing I'll say is it really challenges a lot of our governments because we're transportation people. I'm from a Ministry of Transport. We build things. And so how do we talk about things, removing highways? How do we think about mode shift? These things that have conventionally efforts at the subnational level, how do we bring them up and make them conversations in our ministries at the sort of bring that whole conversation around so that it's not just something around as money comes in to support the development of infrastructure, we're delivering more infrastructure, but we're thinking more smartly about where that money is being spent. It may still be a highway, it may still be a new rail line, but we're trying to embed some of these other goals that maybe get lost in some of our conventional KPIs. So that's, I think, where I would give the greatest sort of thought around an opportunity. It's how do we rethink our ministries of transport, our national level governments, since we're setting nationally determined contributions, but giving the tools and the resources to the people who can make the greatest change, grab those low-hanging fruit items.
Thank you very much for those insights. I think you've mentioned finding the treasure map. I think we're all trying to find our way to the ultimate goal. And so next, perhaps some perspectives from SLOCAT. How do you think countries should better reflect more ambitious transport plans in their NDCs?
I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation just now. I think you capture a lot about what I was about to say. And I have 3 words for this. I think we need ambition, but we also need specificity and we need comprehensiveness. It's so easy to say that we need to raise ambition for transport in the next round of NDC, but what exactly does that even mean, And I think a lot of times when we want to shoot to do something greater than what we think we can, we need to be very specific about what are the actions that need to take place and with setting goals with that. And it goes beyond setting the emission reduction target for transport. It also goes with the non-greenhouse gas emission transport targets. So there must be targets that you can set that are more identifying that immediate mobility needs. There are targets that could be set around enabling structural transformations for integrated transport systems that you were mentioning about, better urban planning systems, better transport management policies. These are all, there could be a range of targets being set across short-term, medium-term, and long-term horizons. This will be very important to kind of add specificity to NDC's ambition. We know that there's not enough balance across passenger and freight. It's very clear that passenger transport dominates over actions on freight transport in NDCs and in LTS as well. And in fact, what we found out with a collaboration that we've done with UN DESA, with the Asian Transport Outlook, under the UK Aid funded project of the High Volume Transport Program, is that 76% of actions identified in the NDCs of Asia and Pacific countries, 76% of these actions actually do not specifically categorize whether they're passenger or freight transport. There's so much ambiguity in terms of what actually was being reflected in these NDCs, and it's not really helpful to help to guide national and subnational priorities. It's not really helpful to guide a freight, sectoral priorities in that sense. And of course, adaptation and resilience continue to be underdeveloped in NDCs. And I think, coming from the collaboration that we've been working on for Asia Pacific, it's important to note that there are a lot of a lot of SIDS in the region, and they're very highly vulnerable to climate disasters. But actually, only 6 of these SIDS in the region recognize transport resilience actions in NDCs. So again, there's a groundswell of resources available to really provide a more wider range of resilience actions that they can include. We can focus on that. Very important to link also with these transport resilience actions to the economic and social linkages, right? Because we know that the economic loss from transport systems disruptions are often greater than the direct damages to transport infrastructures, especially for SIDS again. And what we also found out is that many NDCs really do not present the full picture. Only 10% of climate action, what we found is that a lot of transport measures identified in the NDCs for the region, they only reflect about 10% of the climate actions in the region. So there's also very room for specificity. Comprehensiveness, I think you really cover it. It's a forward shift improve. We often hear about this framework. It's not just about electrification. It's such a politically palatable, low-hanging fruit. So we also need to shoot for the long-term structural void and shift and transport solutions. We need more cross-sectoral, sector coupling solutions with energy, with urban planning, with health sectors as well. I think this will really help to foster more inter-ministry and cross-sectoral collaboration. So again, I think really translating what ambition is, specificity and comprehensiveness, and that we have resources to support countries to do that. And I really look forward to more discussion to know how we can continue to offer these resources to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. And I think you've also raised a lot of important points, which I hope we will be able to go into further details in our next round of questions. So then over to you, Olivia, to share some of your perspectives from the ITF.
Thank you very much. So on the ITF side, we've been working with a lot of partners in this space over the past year to develop a guide on integrating transport into NDCs. I've got it here. Voila. And this will be launched tomorrow by the Minister for Chile as in their role in ITF President. They're really supporting the integration of transport into NDCs. So within this, we have set out a 6-step process or framework that governments could follow to ensure that their NDC transport elements are ambitious, deliverable, and investable. So first, setting a greenhouse gas emission reduction target specifically for the transport sector is essential. This is what articulates how transport will support the delivery of the broader NDC ambition. It will also make that broader NDC ambition kind of more strong, because investors will be able to see exactly how it could be delivered. And so at the moment, only 33% of NDCs have a greenhouse gas emission reduction target for transport. And so this is something that government should really consider moving into the next round. Second, I think as Alice touched on, we need to see a vision for the future of our transport system. This isn't just about decarbonisation. This is about achieving, at the SDG Pavilion, about achieving our broader sustainable development objectives around economic access, education, jobs. And we really need to see that vision for the future of our transport system, because this helps to articulate how decarbonisation sits alongside other challenges and how these actions to decarbonise can also support the delivery of these wider objectives. So again, it makes the NDC more investable because it helps to prove the business case for taking action. Third, governments need to set goals. So these are goals for decarbonising specific modes, all the modes. Shipping and aviation are sometimes not included within the scope of an NDC, but actually this is about scaling up, clean fuels. So setting out the framework for that and the goals that governments want to achieve is really important there. And as was mentioned, this also needs to go across avoid, shift and improve. So how many passenger kilometres will you aim to be completed by active mobility? How many by public transport? So really setting out those goals. And then each of those goals need to be backed up by measures. So will it be greenhouse gas emission reduction standards that will be implemented? Will it be the investing in new infrastructure? Will it be investing in ensuring that our roads are safe? Because, in order to have active mobility, we need our roads to be safe. So setting out all of that, again, creates that confidence in how that will actually be delivered. It's not just about goals, but it's about the implementation, and also looking to areas outside of the transport sector. So the energy sector, how will you work with the energy sector to scale up the renewables necessary to decarbonise the transport sector? And the ITF has the Transport Climate Action Directory with 80 measures that governments could consider in pulling this together. And then finally, the last two elements is a governance, monitoring and evaluation framework. So I think, Jason, you touched on how do we create that alignment between national government action and local action. And this is really where governments can set that out. So what is the framework for delivery? Who is responsible for what? And how will that be coordinated? Because that is essential to deliver these objectives. And then finally, investments. So what are the investment needs? Where will the funding come from? Will it be green bonds? Will it be development assistance? What is the gap? Because that will also show the private sector where there are opportunities for them to invest too. So it will go online tomorrow, so please check it out. But we're really hoping that this will support governments with developing their next round of NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia, for sharing that important tool and bring up this topic of investments. And so maybe we can go back to Mr. George Tavo, because you've also raised the importance of finance, and we know that the transition to zero carbon transport is not cheap. So perhaps a follow-up question for you. What are some effective ways do you think that we should implement to ensure that transport measures included in the NDCs will be investable?
Thank you for that question. From Fiji's perspective, we do have our internal funding mechanisms to support decarbonization, but it's not enough. So we will still rely on our international partners to come into that space as well as to assist us. That's why it's quite important in terms of looking at it from a regional perspective. It carries more weight. So we have the Pacific Blue Shipping Partnership, for example, are some of the areas in which we have invested in, and we hope that we can push that to support our agenda of decarbonization, decarbonizing our shipping sector. In terms of the transport, land transport, we also have plans in place. We're going to look at the electric vehicles, for example. It's still very early into that phase, but we are moving into looking at that prospects as well. We're looking at starting off and looking at our government fleets to start off with. So we hope that if that works well, then we can move into our private sector and tell them, hey, government has taken that initiative, and I think it's about time for the private sector to follow suit. So those are some of the developments that is actually moving on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's also a very important point about multi-stakeholder engagement and bringing in the private sector, and to ensure that a lot of these plans would actually be implemented and there will be sufficient funding for it. Thank you. So maybe going to you as well, Jason, what do you think, how can countries actually create investable measures in their NDCs?
So I'm going to be a little, I guess I'll share a hot take. And it's that I think we need to be careful when we talk about where we're going to get our finance from. Public-private partnerships aren't going to save the world here. And I think we need to be very thoughtful about where we're targeting what investments. So going back to what Alice was saying around, it can't just be electric vehicles. We need to not just go after the low-hanging fruit. Let's give the low-hanging fruit to the private sector and let's activate that where the money is, and then really look back at those harder areas, the fuels questions, the places where we're not going to see the private sector necessarily being the first actor. That's what we do as the public sector. And so I think the interesting thing for me, and I'll just tell one story, I won't mention the country, but I'm a transportation planner. And so when I look at this, I'm thinking around what's the best solution for your context. And so we worked with a country where a minister of transport came back from visiting London and said, I want to have a metro in my city. It's a city of 200,000 people. And so we're thinking to ourselves, why are you going to blow up the budget of your city for mode shift when a perfectly wonderful bus rapid transit would do? And so it's about being discriminate about where you want to spend your money, using the resources that are sort of internationally available. I'm thinking of things like the OECD's Blue Dot Network. So these sort of screening tools that help your economies improve the quality of the projects that are coming forward, so that when you are seeking those international investments from Macquarie or from a pension fund somewhere, that you're able to have the resources to raise the quality of the project. Because I think ultimately there's sort of a mismatch, I think, when governments are thinking about, well, I want to achieve this NDC through this targeted project, but then sort of where the wheels fall off the wagon is that the quality of the RFIs that go out, the sort of the expectations of what the private sector will bring don't align with sort of what the private sector's goals for that project are. Because at the end of the day, they're going to have to see some sort of return on investment. And so when we talk about this issue of financing around transportation generally, but when we specifically focus in on meeting these climate goals, we have to be really discriminate about how are we lining up the quality of the project, the funding mechanism for it, whether it's a P3, whether it's blended finance, whether it's public sector investment, and making sure that we're sort of targeting the right project for the right need, so that the different actors in these different stories all walk away satisfied. Because otherwise, we end up with a lot of really great ideas on paper, we're further setting really great targets, but we don't have the money or we don't have the right pathways to activate these projects, bring them to life to make change.
Thank you very much. That is, I think, one of the key reasons why we're having this event, to really identify some of these pathways, some of these investable and feasible pathways. Thank you very much, Jason. And for Alice, a follow-up question on your previous intervention. So how do you think regional and global cooperation can actually support the development and implementation of progressive and more ambitious NDCs for transport?
I mean, definitely yes, because I think a lot of times countries might think, and we have a country here, countries might do think that they're alone in this process, right? Because the development and the implementation of the NDCs, they would think that it really sits within the ministry, and that's what they needed to do. But regional and global, and coming from the civil society perspective, so we are ready to send a very clear technical and resourceful message that we're here to help, that these are the tools and the resources to help. And I wanted to take an example of a really impressive call to action that we have done with our partners last year in 2023 for fossil-free transport. So it is a call to action to double energy efficient and fossil-free land transport by 2030. It sounds really ambitious, and when we sent out this is really a clear visionary message to COP 28 last year, and we have gathered more than 60 different multi-stakeholders signatories through the call to action. Most importantly, we also got Chile and Colombia on board. That countries do recognize that yes, we can tap into these multi-stakeholder opportunities to strengthen our NDCs, to strengthen our transport development priorities. And we didn't really just stop there after launching a call to action. So this year we identified 3 very specific areas that we wanted to focus on for NDC development and implementation. And that is, we first focus on the ambition analysis gap. We first need to understand where the gap is. So we identify just another analysis on how the existing NDCs addressing or not addressing the 9 action areas for fossil-free transport. And then we showcase what are the positive examples that we already got from specific NDCs and how they could be included in the new rounds of NDCs. We talk about finance. So there are very clear finance messages that we're sending at COP this year, and focusing on the fact that clean transport solutions will cost an estimated $2.7 trillion annually between now and 2050. And that's 7 times more than the current transport spending. And with this very daunting financial gap and challenges, we help countries to understand that, yes, you do need to agree on a new climate finance goal. We also need to prioritize an adequate response package for transport in the loss and damage fund. This is a very important financial mechanism that we can tap into. And we can bring non-state transport actors to the table to really develop, to close the financial gap in transport, as Jason was mentioning. And lastly, I wanted to very quickly talk about capacity, because our community has developed NDC templates. Olivia, you're talking about your NDC guidance for countries. We have NDC templates developed by our partners on rail, on public transport, on popular transport, on active travel. And countries should not feel like there are too many guidance. Transport is such a vibrant and dynamic sector. You do need very specific sectoral guidance from the community, and we were there already providing these resources. So I do think, back to your question, that we are ready to help and we have the existing resources. I think we do require more collaboration among ourselves to make sure that these really get to the countries, really get to the ministry, so that they can tap into these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing this broad scope of opportunities for further engagement and partnership. So for anyone who's interested, please do feel free to reach out after this event. And so, Olivia, for the last question of this event, and since we're in the NDC Pavilion, how do you think the United Nations and other development partners can actually help support countries in their transition to more ambitious transport measures, NDCs, and action plans?
Hello. Does this one work? Yes. Great. So there's a lot that international organizations and the development network can do to support the delivery of these goals. So with ITF's work, just to start with, we will be convening transport ministers our annual summit in Leipzig. And given that the NDC deadline is February, I think we're expecting some to come in maybe a bit later than that. We'll be assessing the extent to which transport has been included in those NDCs, and then really seeing what are the commonalities, what are the investment gaps, and where do governments need help, and then using that ministerial forum as a moment to get buy-in for additional action from the international community to support implementation of those goals. And that also aligns with the work that the Inland Transport Committee at the UN ECE has been doing. They published their greenhouse gas emission reduction strategy for inland transport back in February last year, and part of the action plan was on NDCs. So again, that is a forum through Working Party 5, through all of the regulations that they have to support implementation and alignment of NDC efforts. And then, of course, we convene governments, so there is that exchange of best practice as well. There will be some solutions that will require different approaches in different markets, but there'll definitely be some commonalities, and there's always an impact from aligning efforts and creating economies of scale in some of these technology transitions as well. So this is, I think, really how we see the role of the international government community in supporting these efforts. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those final comments and insights. And we do have to close this event. And thank you all to our panelists for sharing your perspectives and valuable insights once again. And for our participants who have been with us since this morning, there are actually a lot more events on transport tomorrow because it's Transport Day at COP29. And you may have already heard that we do have 2 ministerial events on transport organized organized by the COP presidency and with support from many other organizations, including the ITF, UNECE, and ASCAP. There will be a high-level ministerial event on urban transport at 11 tomorrow morning, and another high-level ministerial transport event on sustainable and digital middle corridor and beyond at 3. So we do hope to see many of you there. And there are, in fact, at least 20 other transport events going on tomorrow. So please do check the schedule. And we do hope that you can join us in better understanding and also helping us learn how to transition in a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient way to a low carbon future. So thank you all.